Hello. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. This is episode 14. Our guest is Steffen Kaplan. Our topic is Nature is the Best Medicine. We'll also talking about other ways to address self-care. My name is Neil Parekh. That's Dawn Helmrich. We're the co-hosts of the show. Dawn, it's always great to see you.
Good to see you too, Neil.
Thank you for being my partner in this.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it. I want to give a shout out to everyone who might be watching this on replay. Usually they're the ones who are going to watch the first few seconds of the show. So thank you for taking the time. I know it doesn't work for everyone's schedule. And we certainly have a few people who watch overseas. That's one of the things we like about this platform is that you can watch whenever it's convenient for you. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and my website. Please make sure to press play on the platform where you're watching, just in case you're watching it on Facebook and it's through someone's feed. We also want you to press play on Twitter if you're watching online. Now, in terms of where we're streaming to, this is actually the first time for this show. We usually stream to my Facebook and Dawn's Facebook, and my Instagram and Dawn's Instagram, and my YouTube, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, and website. But Steffen, a dear friend of mine and a colleague at Digimentors, also allowed us to stream to his Facebook and YouTube as well. So we're trying to meet people wherever they're at. If you're watching, please like the post. Please comment. Let us know where you're watching from. And we'll be posing a question in a little bit. What do you do for self-care? We'll want folks to weigh in on that. But again, we look forward to a great conversation with Steffen. Episode 14, Nature is the Best Medicine. Really self-care in general. You'll hear a little bit of a conversation. Steffen will share his approach and the role nature plays. And then you'll hear some other thoughts from Dawn and myself. And it's going to be a good conversation, Dawn. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Very much so.
Let's say hi to a few folks watching. Steve is watching from Philadelphia. Steve Taylor, a colleague of mine from Digimentors and a friend of Steffen's as well. Thank you, Steve. So great to have you watching. Rochelle Kritzer, Philippek, and I emphasize the Kritzer this time. She's watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. She's not the only one watching from Hastings-on-Hudson. My mom is also watching. They live 2 houses down from each other. But the reason I emphasize the Kritzer in Rochelle's name is that she's going to be our guest on our next episode in September. So September 12th. And Rochelle Kritzer is her professional name. She goes with her maiden name. She's going to be talking about the importance of community support. She has a long career as a school psychologist. So we're looking forward to that. Rochelle, thank you so much for joining us. Rose is watching from Connecticut, another Digimentor colleague. Kate is watching from not downstairs here, but downstairs over there, right?
Yep, downstairs right? Over here. Yep, she sure is.
And my mom is saying all the best to Steffen. My aunt Neela, actually my godmother, is watching from Toronto. So Neela Masi, thank you for watching. And I'll just explain the cultural reference in Gujarati, in the language my family speaks. Instead of saying uncle or aunt, you add something at the end of someone's name to indicate your relationship with them. So her name is Neela. The end of the name, you add the word Masi. That's mother's sister. So thank you for watching. And my mom is reminding me that Rochelle is Dr. Rochelle Kritzer. So I will make sure to fix that on the card. Thank you. Thank you, Mom. My sister is watching from Bellevue, Washington. So thank you, Amy. So we're keeping it in the family, which is...
That's great.
I want to remind folks of the episode that we had last week, which I thought was really good. Grace Apona, Dr. Grace Apona, she has a doctorate in education, talked about the pros and cons of in-person and online therapy. In case you missed the show, we want to give show folks a little bit of a snippet of that conversation. It was really Grace's thoughts at the end. It really wrapped things up really well. So we're going to share that first, and then we'll go into this evening's topic.
That online therapy and in-person therapy are both really good options, and that there's a lot of different sort of considerations that one has to have. And like, again, it really depends on the person's age, what they're struggling with, and, their resources. Are the ability to be able to do Zoom, and again, in a secure and safe place. And that's something that we touched upon in this conversation. And also, again, going back to the struggles, sometimes people really do find the accountability, and Dawn mentioned that, it's really important to be in person and, again, to have that connection with somebody. But overall, I just appreciate that now that we are shifting to allowing people to have options. And I do think, going to what, piggybacking what you were saying, Neil, is that it allows for the conversation to include mental health, because it is something that there's more options now. And, I do find with younger generations, the nice thing is that they're really including that. They're like, yeah, I talked to my friend, we hung out here, we did that. I had a, meeting with my counselor, and it wasn't a big deal. And so that movement is just amazing, and that continuing to head in that direction, and, be able to talk about it also with just like, feeling empowered by that and feeling good about that. I am taking care of myself, and this is how I'm taking care of myself. And so the fact that, again, there's more options for people, I think in general is really, really beneficial.
Sorry, that was Grace Hapona joining us in our last episode 2 weeks ago. We talked about the pros and cons of in-person and online therapy. And if you missed it, you can find it in our archives on my website. Feel free to go to Neil Parekh, Shining Light on Shadows, to find previous episodes and blog posts for each episode. Speaking of blog posts, we want to kick things off and share Steffen's blog post, and then bring him on to talk about what his approach is to self-care. Steffen wrote, nature photography keeps me healthy, happy, and focused. When I'm out on my walks, I let everything flow and things just develop right in front of me. I'm observing the natural environment. We're going to ask Steffen to join us and talk a little more about how nature is his approach to self-care. Steffen, thank you for joining us. Always great to see you, my friend.
Hey, hi guys. It's wonderful to be here. I'm very excited about this because it's actually a foray into a different environment for me on a show such as Shining Light on Shadows, which first I'd like to take a minute to just commend you both for doing such a brave and purposeful show on helping others talk about many things, from mental stress and other problems to sexual abuse or whatever has unfortunately affected them in life. So hats off to you guys for doing this. It's a wonderful community you're building.
Thank you, Steffen. And you're certainly a part of that community. You've watched a number of episodes. So we've appreciated your support. You've also done a great job, just as our other Digimentors colleagues have done, help to amplify the show and help to spread the word about it. So before we turn it over to you, do want to do a big shout out to Digimentors. We produced this show with pro bono support from Digimentors. I'm the vice president of events and communications, but I really want to hand it to Sri Srinivasan, our co-founder, and the rest of our leadership team for giving me the time, space, and resources to do this show. It's not a small endeavor. It definitely takes a lot of the resources that we cover from Digimentors, but also my time to put it together. So at Digimentors, we do digital marketing, events and digital programs, strategic communications, training, and workshops. We also help with staffing and recruiting. And if you follow any of the posts that we share, you know that we're also doing a lot of work with AI. So again, hats off and thanks again for the support that I've gotten, not just from you, Steffen, but from a number of colleagues who watch the show on a regular basis. People like Steve Taylor, people like Rose, a number of other people as well. So thank you. So with that, Steffen, I love seeing your photography, seeing the work you do. Going into the celery preserve near where you live in Ramsey, New Jersey. Tell us a little bit about how this came about. You know, what drew you to what drew the city boy to the woods, effectively.
That's an excellent intro right there. Wow, because it's funny, you know, when I first started doing social media and other things a while back, I was trying to think of a million names to determine for a blog. And one of the things, just making a quick joke about what you said about the city boy to the burbs, is I thought of a title like that, you know, City Boy in the Burbs. And I was like, nah, that's too Martha Stewartish. That's not going to work. Anyway, you know, I've tried to figure out how to encapsulate it all and make it into a short story, because a storytelling can go too long for many people, and I don't want to be a part of that. But what I really found is that, so first, a little background. For many years, I was in journalism at the New York Times as a photo editor, and also a freelance photojournalist. To cut through all the chase, I documented the NYPD, and I did a ton of street photography for years, and I still do. But that was very stressful. That was really, really hard work and very impactful in many ways, but hard. So carry it full, you know, fast forward many years. We're in the middle of the pandemic and everything. And listen, I'm not immune to stress. I've had a lot of stress in my life at different points in my life. Early in my life, I dealt with a lot of stress from work and stuff, even suffered from mild panic attacks way back when. Thank God all that's way behind me. But the point is that I wanted to learn how to manage stress better in my life and my mental health and everything. So especially being a father and other things, it makes you better at everything that way. So when the pandemic hit, fast forwarding very far ahead here, I, like everybody else, needed to get outside. I needed to get out of the house. I'm an extrovert, a total extrovert. In fact, some people say an extrovert on steroids. I love being around people. I love meeting people. I love striking up conversation with just about anybody. You've heard of tree huggers? Well, I can pretty much even talk to a tree. I'm just joking. But anyway, might be a great conversation. But the pandemic hit, and I decided that I'm going to start taking a lot of nature walks. We couldn't be around crowds. We couldn't do a lot of things around friends. I had to get out. So I started hitting the trails at a place called the Celery Farm Nature Preserve. I had explored state parks and everything, but there was something about the Celery Farm Nature Preserve in Allendale, New Jersey. And it just attracted me because the trails are small. It goes around a big body of water, a lake. And there's all sorts of great wildlife in it, and just foliage and everything else. It's beautiful. On a September day, it's heaven. Most of the fall, it's heaven. I found that it's heaven all year round. The only time I really don't enjoy being in there is when it's very wet and damp, because it is in Mosquito City, and they like me like bacon. So I pretty much stay out of there during those periods. But what I found by immersing myself in nature more and more was that certain things started to happen to me. I realized I had less headaches. I suffered from migraines for many years. I still get a few here and there, but not as bad as I used to. And from TMJ and a couple of other problems that I've dealt with over the years. But I realized that my body was feeling better. My muscles were not as tight, and everything was better. Then something else started to happen. I started to realize my mental clarity was better. I was more focused. Then the biggest thing happened for me, being a creative person. My creativity just started to go to new heights. And for me, that was like, you know, the best, because I was like, I'm really feeling creative these days. And I realized it was from my mind being clearer, my body feeling better, less headaches, everything. Because when we're consumed by that stuff, it takes away from our well-being, it takes away from our creativity and what we do. So what I really decided to do was start carrying my camera a lot with me as well. And, you know, a lot of photographers go out looking for certain pictures or and doing certain things. Like when I was a photojournalist, I was out on a mission to always look for the great street photographs and everything else. But when I was going to the celery farm, I started to realize that I don't want it to be only photography oriented, because I want to just relax my brain and relax my body and everything, my spirit and everything else. So that's how that started to happen, Dawn. And I started to go out on these walks and take them more and more. And then, you know, I always loved the quote from Einstein, which was, look deep into nature and you will understand everything better. And that really resonated with me. And I really started to think that was like my mantra after a while, because it really means a lot and it says a lot. So I'll take a breath there for a second.
Sure. Yeah, no, you know, I found it so interesting because after we had this, you know, our like prep discussion, I was doing just a ton of research, and there's like so much out there that really talks about the benefit of like taking walks and like especially like bodies of water. They were talking about, like, you know, people talk about green space, but blue space is something that was discussed a lot too. And how, and for me, like when because we talked, I'm a mosquito magnet too, and I've got lots of allergies, and like nature and I, you know, we struggle a little bit, but boy, you just give me like a gorgeous body of water, and you know, or an ocean or anything like that, and there's just like this, literally this wave, no pun intended, of calm that will come over me when I'm near water like that.
Exactly. Oh, and
So
I totally get it, and I totally agree with you. For many years, I'm a born and bred Greenwich Villager. Well, I shouldn't say born and bred Greenwich Villager. I was born uptown, but I lived in Greenwich Village my whole life, since I was like 3. Anyway, my point is I lived in the West Village for many years as an adult. And I was fortunate enough to have a great riverside studio on the Hudson River, on Horatio Street, overlooking the entire Hudson, that part of the Hudson. And it was great. And then when I moved out of New York, finally, right before September 11th, I had moved to Jersey City. And I lived on the waterfront right across the river from that. But my point is that I always loved living near the water, and being near the water. For years, I traveled to the Caribbean for that one reason. There's something magical about bodies of water, you know?
Yeah. And I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I have the privilege of having this gorgeous lakefront, you know, that's like 15 minutes from my house, that I don't utilize enough, right? Like it's almost like being by the ocean, because the water is, you know, the body of water is vast, and you can't see anything but the horizon, and the, you know, the sunrises are beautiful, and but I don't take advantage of it as much as I should, for sure.
Well, that's the thing, you know. So we had to talk about this as we were getting ready to do this show together. And one of the things we talked about was, and I'm going to bring this in early, is that everybody needs to find what's right for them, right? My therapy is nature and nature photography, and being in the middle of it now, and it does me the most good. So I found what works for me finally after all these years, and I never intend to deviate from it, because it really has helped me that much. But it's important to find what works for you. And then, you know, we had to talk about this. Nature may not work for you in certain seasons, because like you said, me and you are like bacon to mosquitoes. But the bottom line, just hang up a strip of bacon. That's me in a thing of mosquitoes. But the thing is that wintertime, for example, if you dress warm enough, winter is exhilarating in nature preserves in place, because I don't know if you've ever been in the middle of a whiteout, but as long as you're safe and you're in the middle of a safe area, it's exhilarating. I was in a whiteout about 3 years ago for the first time, And I felt like a kid. I was literally jumping up and down. I was so happy. I was like, this is so cool. And like
Yeah.
I couldn't see anything around me, but it was like incredible. I didn't made sure I didn't walk to the lake that was to my right. And I made sure I didn't walk to the left when
Yeah.
it was probably something else. I just stayed put. The wind was incredible. I was getting jerked around a bit, but it was exhilarating. So if you're prepared, or you're safe and other things, different elements can be really, really incredibly exhilarating, you know?
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that because I've been to Alaska once.
Mhm,
My brother got married there on 11/11/11
mhm.
and in a little town called Talkeetna.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
there was a major whiteout in this little town of Talkeetna. And I just remember standing in the middle of this street
Right,
and it was so quiet. It was
right,
unbelievably quiet and
right.
so beautiful and so zen-like.
Mhm,
It was like an out of body experience for me.
mhm.
And like I hate winter, I hate snow. Most calming, most beautiful atmosphere I've ever been in my entire life. And I've
Absolutely.
been to Hawaii multiple times, but that whiteout in Talkeetna, Alaska was by and far the most spectacular thing I've ever experienced.
Yeah,
So
you
yeah, I
know,
totally hear you.
when you start to experience these things, they stay with you for a long time, and that's one of the things. I'll segue right now quickly into photography and how I really started to realize what a benefit nature, not just nature, but photography was important. So, like we said, everybody meditates different. Well, we didn't say this yet. We said everybody needs to find what works for them. Segue into this part. Well, everybody needs to find what works for them, including maybe a form of meditation. So, being a street photographer, I captured this photo one day, and this young lady was in the middle of Times Square. And I worked in the middle of Times Square for 20 years. It's crazy. It's insane every day. But this young lady was meditating in the middle of Times Square. I always kept this photo. I always loved it. And she was in a zone, man. She was there. And I was like, wow, I would love to be able to do that, but I can't. I tried. I'd spent hundreds of dollars on courses, on other things. It just didn't, I can't sit still that way. I have a lot of energy. So I needed to find something that brings me to peace and helps me with all the other stuff that we talked about in my own way and in a proper environment. So that young lady, to me, encapsulates what many people can do, but I can't. So I kept it all these years because God bless her, but she's able to do that in the middle of such chaos. So nature for me, as opposed to this, Neil was just putting up the photo of the heron. I've learned a lot from nature as well. And this is the beautiful thing. If you really start to study nature, and when you love photography, you can even study it more, in my opinion, because you start looking at the real little things. Not that people who walk in nature don't look at the little things, but when you do photography and videos and stuff, it really starts to illuminate even more and bring more to the foreground, so to say. So, this heron is a perfect example of how nature can teach us things, even meditation. Herons are incredible birds, incredible creatures. They're so ultra focused on everything they do that I can literally, as in this photo, get really close to this heron. I wasn't using a big zoom lens for this. I was really close. They are so ultra focused on their prey, on what they're doing, on what they're looking for, that they don't budge. So you are very quiet, and I've learned how to be very timid and also very easygoing in nature. When I walk, I have a lighter walk. My wife wouldn't agree. She says I walk like an elephant or a Mack truck in the house. But when I'm out in nature, I walk very carefully and very easily. And I've learned how to really pace myself that way out there. And it brings me into these wonderful settings where certain things don't get scared off as easily. But this is a really interesting thing that I discovered with visuals and nature. So let's say you're in the middle of your walk. Well, several things. Let's set the stage. So you're out for a walk in nature and you're doing these things, Neil and Dawn. And one of the things that you do is you have your phone with you, right? Most people do photos with their phone these days. I have a pro camera and a phone, but I carry both. But my phone is set on airplane mode. I do that because when I'm in the middle of all of this, in the middle of all this serenity, I don't want anything bothering me. I don't want a vibration on my phone. I don't want anything going on. So number one rule, put your phone on airplane mode. Don't worry about text messages. Don't worry about this. Don't worry about that. Now, if you're on a schedule, well, that's a different story. You're going to have to obviously do what you have to do. But the cardinal rule of thumb for me is find an hour where you can shut that off, put it on airplane mode, and you can still use your camera and video that way. The other thing is you don't want to be busy all the time or consumed with technicalities. So if you learn how to use your devices better, you'll be better at incorporating them when you need them, and ready to get a photo that you'd want to get. Now, when I see things, though, I study them for a while. Unless the light's about to change dramatically or there's a creature nearby that I really want to get a shot of, most of the time I study them. And that really helps because I find the little things that really stand out amongst these scenes that that bring everything more into focus, more into light. And it allows me to envision things that sometimes I really wouldn't even necessarily envision, even looking through the viewfinder, because I've really given it some real thought. And I'm thinking about the spiritual aspects of all of this. I'm thinking about I'm listening to the wind. I'm listening to the leaves. I hear the wind coming in a certain way. I'm already knowing the leaves are going to move certain ways. The trees may sway, like here, for example. This is actually very funny because Neil and I and our Digimentors colleagues are at a retreat up in this area one day. I woke up super early, as I like to do. That's the best time to be out in nature or at sunset. And I took a walk and I was looking up at this beautiful, just way the trees were just in a circle almost, and the pan vision of it just made me go crazy. So I took this photo and I love it. Sure. Because I do a whole thing called Just Look Up, and it really means a lot because I really believe people, if they looked up more at a lot of things, and look down sometimes too, but look up, you'd see so much more in the sky, so much more in the trees and the forest and other things. So I'm going to take a breath there and let you guys, jump in here. I don't want to dominate the conversation.
No, of course. I want to bring in a couple of comments from people watching. Jonathan, a good friend of ours, says, belated hello from the East Village, where nature is whatever you find in Tompkins Square.
That's right. That's right.
Rose says, creativity, boom. And we had Eileen Taylor saying hello from watching in Philadelphia. I wonder, Steve, is this someone you know? Steve Taylor in Philadelphia as well?
That's right.
Is Eileen? And then Edward Leskin, who I believe is a friend of yours, Steffen.
Yes.
Your efforts to bring us together during a time of great stress and uncertainty, and to connect with our photography and our thoughts on life will never be forgotten. Spinach Social Hour was a life preserver in a rough sea.
Wow.
Not only for you, but all of us, and gave us a sense of community when we thought too much was lost.
Wow.
For folks who may not know, Steffen had a regular program, the Spinach Social Hour, where he would bring on fellow photographers in that effort to build community, maintain community during COVID when we were all isolated. He showcased his colleagues' work on a similar live stream show, and it really was great to see.
I teared up over that comment. I'm sorry, but that really made me like very emotional because Edward, phenomenal photographer, first of all, documents the steel workers up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And we came together through this show because I found his work. Anyway, well, thank you, Edward. That's just beautiful. And you know
absolutely.
What? It meant a lot. Yeah, thank you.
So what I want to do now is to move the conversation along. Steffen shared kind of his his bomb effectively for whether it's anxiety or stress or just kind of dealing with life. Get out in nature, bring your camera, and you saw from some of the photographs, with that kind of vision, with that kind of eye, how you can really it's almost a meditative practice. Dawn wrote a blog post as well. We'll bring that up. Finding that something that brings us joy is well worth the effort. Finding that thing or things in our lives that make us feel better when we are struggling is probably one of the most important aspects of self-love and wellness. Dawn, Steffen talked a little bit about being a bug magnet. What's it like for you when you get out into nature, when you go for your long walks, particularly when you're with your husband, Jim, who I will note I have not seen a comment from. This is the first show I haven't seen him yet. I'm a little worried
Jim,
about him. Is he
Jim
okay? Is he there? Is he?
Jim is currently banned from Facebook.
Oh.
So he's banned.
Probably with good reason.
Apparently for something that he posted like a year and a half ago that didn't meet Facebook standards.
Not surprised.
That happens. That yes, I'm sure you're not. But he's watching on YouTube right now. So
if he has a YouTube account, he can sign in and leave a comment there.
Well,
if you're watching, Jim,
you heard that, James, you can sign in and
you can also watch on my website and leave a comment at the bottom of the page, and I'll make sure to read it. I'm just saying.
Hey, he said. He said, hey.
Hey.
Yes.
Jim Newberg in the hay house.
Neil was a little worried about you, Jim. So yeah. So
but with that,
he's here. So
when you are out with Jim, what does that look like when you're walking with Jim in the woods? What happens?
Yeah, so Jim and I are not nature people. And part of it is that I have asthma, I have very bad allergies, and I'm a bug magnet, and I'm also allergic to mosquitoes. So when I get bit, it's like literally a $50 sized, welt on my body. So I'm not the biggest nature fan. I love a beautiful body of water. Steffen and I were just talking about that, and that is very nature-esque. And Jim and I we went to Lake Geneva for our honeymoon. We took a lovely walk around the lake in Lake Geneva. So it's not that I never get out and take walks, and I do love nature. It's just nature doesn't love me as much. I do want to pose this question. I think you posed it on the screen, Neil, but I'd be really interested in hearing. Yes, and the sun is very mean to Jim. So Jim is he's a ginger by nature, and if he's out in the sun for 5 minutes, he will burn to a crisp immediately. It's almost like he's allergic to the sun. So it's just not very good for us. But my question that I wanted to pose that Neil put up earlier is, what are some things that you all do for self-care? Because my blog was really about the thing that so I grew up in musical theater, and I love singing, and some people say that I'm pretty good at it. But after I was raped, I lost that. I lost that love, that ability to be, in theater, and I didn't do it for years and years and years. And 3 years ago, Jim bought me a karaoke machine for Christmas. And I know he has very big regrets for buying that now, but every single week, at least once a week, we pull out that karaoke machine and we sing. And it's my stress reliever. It doesn't matter. If my week is horrible, that's the thing that I look forward to. It brings me joy. It brings me comfort. There are, music for me is really powerful. And I, on days when, we call it sad. Well, we call it sad music, but we call it more than that. But when you're feeling really down or depressed, sometimes singing a really depressingly sad song is the best medicine in the world. It makes you not feel lonely. It, it brings me to a place where, I can contemplate, or it brings me to tears. And sometimes that's a really good release too, that I need. So that whole idea of singing to me is my self-care. It's what I do to make me feel more whole.
I think that's important. It's part of that larger conversation. And if you see the ticker across the bottom, what do you do for self-care? For the folks watching, we'd be curious to see what your answers are. Because I think this, at the end of the day, the goal, the kind of the focus of the conversation is that you need to do what's right for you, what works, and you need to, yourself, kind of what you will respond to. I took a slightly different tack in my blog post, and for folks who are familiar with the show, we try to, we have our guest write a post to kind of expand on their thoughts. Dawn and I will, either know what we want to say ahead of time, or we'll riff on what our guest is saying. So for my post, the title was "Nature Walks Are Good, but is it the right place to start with self-care?" I think, and what I wrote, I get overwhelmed thinking about the possibilities. Self-care is absolutely important, but where do I start? Not knowing where to start leads to paralysis, and frankly, not starting anywhere. And what I will say, kind of in that regard, Steffen, is that when I wrote the post, I was actually, not in a great place as I was writing, thinking about all the things that I should be doing. Now, getting out for walks is good. And our Digimentors colleagues, some of whom are watching, know that in our WhatsApp group, we actually have a hashtag, Get Neil Outside, because I spend a lot of my time.
Remember, it's been
right in the house and in at this seat. I did actually get outside today. I made it a point. I had a time in my schedule. I went for a nice walk with Pam in the neighborhood. But in my post, I really struggled with what I feel like is a long list of things that I need to be doing, whether it's getting to bed earlier, eating better, taking my blood pressure medicine more regularly, using my CPAP machine, even, and there are things I didn't mention, but like cleaning my room. I know that I'd feel better. You don't see the mess. I've strategically placed the mess, so it's not on camera.
We all
right. I mean, that's part of what we do, but it even goes so far as to, I and I'm going to bring this up intentionally. In I'd say back in April or so, in talking with my therapist, and again, I want to repeat that for folks in the back. I talk with my therapist. I meet a therapist once a week. Before starting the show, I never would have said those words out loud. I never would have revealed to anyone that I was in therapy. But in talking to my therapist, came up with, should we look into the possibility of ADHD, adult ADHD? I reached out to a place to get some testing done. I'm on the list. I have a long form that I have to fill out to be able to get into their process. Still haven't filled that out. But the reason I bring it up is that in my conversation with her this week, I shared my blog post with her, and she said that those were classic signs for adult ADHD. When you get, that kind of overwhelmed by that list of things to do when you can't activate, and that definitely gave me pause. So it's really, it kind of brought up a lot of issues for me. But again, I did get outside today. We did go for a walk, and it certainly was helpful. But it's hard to know where to start, what to do.
That's one of the things that, listening to both of you talk about different parts of how you deal with stress, or trying to come to grips with certain things, like would nature walks benefit me, excuse me, and stuff like that. Is that, trust me, it didn't happen to me like overnight either. It just slowly dawned upon me that I started to discover.
Dawned
upon me. Yes, there you go. I'm a master of puns without even knowing it. Trust me.
I'm sure it's the first time you've heard that, Dawn. I'm sure it's the first time.
The very first. Yes, the very first.
Way back to vaudeville days almost, right? Not saying you're that old, Dawn. I'm not saying.
I am.
No, you're not. But the thing is that it didn't, you know, it evolved. It evolved, and everything evolves. But the one thing that I realized, talking about what you were just hitting on, Neil, about how things can consume you because we all have so much to juggle these days. That is the number one thing that most of us have to come to grips with, is how much we all have to juggle these days with digital, with our phones going off all the time. So all these things, that was me to up, you know, to the 10th power, you know?
Sure.
And
Sure.
I didn't want that in my life anymore. I just came to a point that between the migraines, between this, between that, I had to start doing something. Luckily, it walked right into my life. Pardon the pun there about walking into my life. But like I said, I'm a master of them without knowing. But I started doing these nature walks because of the pandemic. I'm not saying everything has a silver lining, but for me, the what happened to us during the pandemic became a secret silver lining for me, because it got me into something that I probably would never have gotten into that way.
Sure. Sure.
And you know, the one thing I want to say is that a lot of this always made me look at life and start thinking about things in terms of, and I'm really tie this together here. I do a lot of work around people who work on the topic of purpose in life. At Emory University, there's a big purpose project and initiative going on. And I work with the Center for Study of Human Health there. And purpose is really defined by several things. So Dr. Christine Whalen, who's a good friend of mine and also teaches this topic there, always says it's about using our gifts in combination with our values to make a difference in society or in someone's life or the lives of others. So one of the things that I love about incorporating nature and photography into the whole purpose thing is that I also find purpose in sharing my photos. And this may sound hokey to some people, but I'm not a hokey guy that way. I'm serious. I bring these photos online, and I bring my teachings of all of this online, and it's really helping people. I've lectured at Emory about this to classes of students. I've given walks. Emory is great because they have a nature preserve, of all places for me to end up working with. They have a nature preserve on campus, a big one.
Great.
And it's like 4 times the size of the celery farm. So I was in heaven when I discovered this.
Sure.
So I started leading some nature walks with students and faculty and things like that. And I really realized one day when a professor there said to me, you know, he came on my walk and he was like, wow, I really love the what you're talking about and what you're digging into here. And he started doing it, and he says, you're onto something here, and it's really great, you know?
That's great. That's great. I want to bring in some comments, Steffen, some great comments from folks. And a clarification on an earlier comment. We had Eileen Taylor saying that she's watching from Philadelphia, and the mystery has been solved. Steve Taylor says, hi, Mom. So we have 2 moms watching on the show, Steve Taylor's mom and my mom. Thank you both for watching. My sister had a comment. I used to be an extrovert, but now I turn inwards for self-care. I like quiet time, alone time, reading, and sharing inspirational quotes. I also love to dance to any kind of music. In particular, she's a fan of flamenco. I point that out because Jonathan is watching. So I know Jonathan is also a fan of flamenco. Rose says, so interesting to hear how singing brings you joy or tears. Thank you, Neil, Dawn, and Steffen, for this conversation. Rose loves to garden and see what is blooming as the seasons go on. It can sometimes be like meditation. Absolutely.
And she's a great writer of poetry too.
She is. Dawn, do you want to read Kate's comment? Your friend downstairs?
Yep. Kate says, I enjoy being creative, not artistic, which is not true. She's incredibly artistic. She's not giving herself enough credit. But I enjoy hands-on problem solving in a creative way. Very grounding to me. And on a side note, like, Kate is a master baker. She can crochet anything underneath the sun. But on top of that, she can do plumbing, electric. She can paint your ceiling. Like, she's unbelievable. She can do she's a very, very handy person on top of
her. Over to my house, please.
Right.
That's
right.
Convenient when she's your landlady. So
It
yeah,
is
that's
convenient
pretty
when she's my
cool.
landlady, and when I'm selling my house right now. Let me tell you,
Oh.
she's been a blessing for
Yes.
that. So
I saw your post about that,
Yeah.
and I do want to say that I had the pleasure of meeting Kate when I was in Milwaukee 2 years ago now, and she is just a joy. She was also a guest on our show just earlier in the spring, talking about her son. Dawn talked about her son as well, some of the challenges they face. And I just want to point out, Kate, for what it's worth, I had someone call me yesterday or a day before yesterday, someone I hadn't spoken to in about a year, just out of the blue. Hey, Neil, do you have a minute? And she was in a little bit of a crisis with a family member dealing with bipolar. And she specifically said, can you had a guest on that talked about this. I think it would be helpful if I could watch that episode. And I sent her that link. So I just want to let you know that really appreciate you sharing your story, Kate, as you did several shows ago. It definitely made a difference for folks.
Neil,
please, Steffen.
No, I just want, before I forget, I just want to tie in a couple of more things, if I may, and they're really important. So one of the things that I also latched onto with the whole nature thing is that years ago, the Japanese were doing studies on stress and problems in society they had with suicide and many other things, brought itself into this during the tech boom and other things. They started coming up, somebody came up with a term, I forget who it was exactly, but there were studies done on what's called forest bathing. Now, I don't mean going into the forest and stripping your clothes off and bathing in the leaves or anything. No, it's a joke that I make because a lot of people forest bathing. It's really a scientific realm now. People study this. It's really important to Google it and check it out. In Japanese, it's called Shinrin Yoku. And forest bathing. And it really tells the story about how being immersed in natural environments, especially forests and other things, can lend itself to lowering your blood pressure. Speaking of blood pressure, helping with many things, mental and physical. So everybody should look into that. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on technically about photography and nature, before I forget about that, because this was important, was that when you're photographing things, so let's say you're taking some pictures and you end up with some beautiful memories and stuff. Well, that's important because say you needed something on your phone that brings you less stress, right? Well, what would be better than having some videos or photos of moments from your walks that really are personalized that way then? Because when I'm walking, I have so many memories of things that because my mind's so much clearer, my mind starts working in different ways. I have memories of my childhood for some reason of things. I may have memories of somebody that was very close to me, whatever it is. But if you keep like a folder on your phone that you move a bunch of these photos and videos in, I'm not talking hundreds, I'm talking a nice selection of them. Well, think about this. If you wanted something peaceful to look at a certain point of the day, or even listen to, if it was a video of the forest and the leaves moving in a windy day, or you were Googling something to find out, what would mean more to you? The memories that surfaced when you encountered these things in real life and then had them that you took yourself on your phone? Or just Googling somebody else's work and looking at it. And there's no way it would have the same meaning. So I found that to be an important part of all of this too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple other comments I want to bring in as we're approaching the end of our show. We still have a few more minutes, but Steve Taylor, for me, the less self-care I do, the worse I am likely to be doing. And the worse I'm doing, the harder it is to do self-care. It definitely... Steve, that really speaks to me, and you know, he goes on to say breaking that circle is a challenge. I couldn't empathize more, Steve. I certainly hear what you're saying with that. And he says now what I do is walking, cooking, reading, crossword puzzles, gardening, photography, learning new things.
Excellent.
Rose says, I also write poetry, as Steffen mentioned earlier, at particularly beautiful places, the beach, a sunset, trees. Walking barefoot on grass is cool. That's great, Rose. Just I once stepped on a bee when I was walking barefoot when I was 6 years old, and I still remember it. And just be careful out there. I still hate bees, frankly. Amy says that self-care for her also involves listening to inspirational speakers, podcasts, music, saying positive affirmations. My aunt, my godmother, watching from Toronto, says I like photography, and sometimes I take lots of pictures and find it very relaxing. I also like to listen to music, and that's also relaxing. Thank you for that.
And what she just said, Neil, just one more quick thing. You know, when you're out there doing the photography, Neela, you know, you start to study the colors more of things. You start to look at the textures of things. You start to look at the ripples in the water differently. Whatever the clouds, the patterns of the clouds. You know, Neil was showing an earlier photo of clouds and this and that. I look at clouds differently, all these things. So you start to really study all the minor details, become hyper focused. And that's the beauty of it. And it much more comes out to you, and all of that starts to make you feel better. But really, the emphasis, I love this show because it really did hit on so many things. Plus from you guys, I love the intersection of everything. Find what works for you. You know, what brings you joy and purpose, you know? And
I want to, you mentioned something, Steffen, about the benefit of taking pictures and then having them on your phone for later. You know, I obviously, I take a lot of pictures as well.
Look at the ones on your wall.
Google, like the ones on my wall behind me, that's from Maui. They give me a lot of joy. I will say my intention, I set up this thing on my wall so that it's easy to swap pictures out once a month. And I haven't swapped them out since in 2 years, but you know, I might get there at some point. But a set of pictures that I might use for that is I got a memory. Google Photos actually does a really great job of sending up memories and collections. And so just today, it sent me this collection, which really gave me a lot of joy. I'm going to just share this quick, you know, set of sunrise and sunset. That's Jamnagar, where my mom and Nilamasi are from. I'm going to go back. That's a fort in the middle of Chincoteague, Virginia. Just, it's brought together. It's a vertical video. It doesn't really fit this space, but sunrise and sunsets from Maui. You'll see Fort Lee in there, Amy, pretty soon. You know, this gave me joy just to look at and to kind of bring back.
Yeah. And it probably brought back so many memories to you.
Absolutely. That's Stonington, Connecticut, right there. This is Ravensworth. Outside my door. This is my neighborhood. And I think I close with this is Seattle, and then I think Fort Lee is right here. That's probably a sunrise picture. But yeah, that kind of thing is really, really great for keeping you grounded.
And that's the mental connection, the memories, and it stimulates your mind to start thinking about that stuff, and they're good memories. So you have those through your photos and videos. The thing is not to become a slave to your phones the way we used to be, but using technology to actually help you. And by doing these things with it, by putting your phone on airplane mode, like I said, when you go out for walks and taking pictures in nature, all that tech doesn't have to be horrible. It can be great if you use it properly.
Sure.
You know?
So in each show, you know, we like to make it obviously very personal, and we share kind of our own perspectives on things. I do want to make sure I'm a little concerned that my mom might be sitting there having palpitations from when I mentioned earlier that I don't take my blood pressure medication as much as I should. I do take it, I'll say, you know, probably every couple of days. You know, I take it enough to keep it down, put it that way. It doesn't get too high. I have a blood pressure cuff at home. So Mom, I don't want you to worry too much. And I'm sure she's probably texting my aunt right now. Oh my God, what's going on? He's not taking his medication. I have to go down to DC. I'm fine, Mom. I'll be okay.
And you're definitely not drinking enough water.
Well, okay. Here we go. Here's a little more. This is actually not water. It's ginseng iced tea.
But it's fluids, and you should be drinking more fluids.
I should be drinking more fluids. Mom,
I've learned
two sips if you're counting, Mom, because I know you're counting. Part of our show, you know, we talk about the personal. We like to have a little bit of fun as well, you know, keep things not too serious. But we also like to take a academic look at things and look at some of the research around this. This is Dawn's specialty. at United Way of Greater Milwaukee and Waukesha County. That's how I got to know her, through my work with United Way. She is a researcher by training and at heart. She's also an instructor teaching classes at a local college. So she does research on every show, looking at kind of some of the data behind the topics we're talking about. So Dawn, can you walk us through some of the research that you found?
Yeah, so and I was telling Neil, or I was telling Steffen this beforehand, that there's some really great studies out there about the impact of nature on human health. And in one of the studies that I found, they did a review of all these studies that are done on nature, and of those studies, 92% demonstrated consistent improvement across any health outcome where individuals engaged with natural outdoor environments. And mental health outcomes improved across 98% of the studies, while physical and cognitive health outcomes showed improvements across 83 and 75% of the studies, respectively, which I thought was really impressive. I think there was like 1,300 studies, and they like whittled it down to 87 or so studies that fell into their criteria that were done about how nature affects mental health. So I thought that was pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then there was some more data from Mental Health America that you found.
Yeah, and we use Mental Health America a lot on this show for different aspects of mental health. Mental Health America says spending time in nature is linked to many positive mental health outcomes, such as improved focus, lower stress, better moods, and reduced risk of developing a mental health condition. And most studies on nature and well-being look at green spaces like parks and forests, but researchers are also beginning to look at blue spaces, which we've talked a lot about, which is places with oceans and river views. So
absolutely. And it's interesting, we've thought about blue spaces in that sense. For Pam and I, our relationship over the years, there's been a lot of blue in terms of where the milestones for us. Our first date was at a waterfall near college. We got engaged on the Chesapeake. We got married in Victoria, right on the water. So it really has been a theme for our life, and it definitely has brought a lot of calm and peace where we've been. We grew up in Hastings on Hudson, right on the Hudson River. That definitely was a special place as well. Thank you for finding that, Dawn. It really does does work. We also want to share some resources with folks. Some stats. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and if folks want their contact information, we always share it on the bottom of the screen. Their number is 1-800-950-6264, 1-800-950-6264. You can also find them at nami.org. I mentioned a friend of mine who reached out, who needed some help, and I referred them to NAMI, and they were very grateful for that. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if we didn't have this show, if I wasn't kind of aware of the resources that were out there. We also want to share some of the stats from Mental Health America, as we mentioned earlier. Again, this is something that we share every episode. 18% of adults have a mental health condition. That's over 43 million Americans. You can reach Mental Health America at their website, mhanational.org, mhanational.org. You can also chat with them at 988lifeline.org. Dawn mentioned earlier about being a survivor of being raped earlier. I think this is now 20 plus 25 years ago, 30 even, Dawn?
30, it'll be 31.
31 years.
Yep.
Dawn and I are both survivors. We've talked about it on this show and other shows, but we always share this data point from RAINN, the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. Every 68 seconds, an American is sexually assaulted. You can find their information at rain.org, RAINN.org. They also have a hotline, 800-656-HOPE, 800-656-HOPE. It's something that is, just part of who we are and kind of what our makeup is. It doesn't necessarily explain everything. It's not, kind of, oh, this happened to Neil or Dawn, this is why they are this way, or this is why they have certain behaviors. At the same time, what I've learned over the last year is that there are certain behaviors that can be tied to that trauma that happened earlier in life. So we just want to kind of recognize that and honor that experience. We appreciate you sticking with us. We will ask Steffen to offer some final thoughts about self-care and nature. Kind of sum it up for folks, particularly if they may have joined us late. In 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes, Steffen, because if it's more than 2 minutes, I won't be able to share it on Twitter. Talk about the role that nature plays in kind of keeping your balance in terms of mental health.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'll say in summary, really, this is better than anything else I could say, is that, listen, as we all juggle so much in life, we also have to realize that we're going to fall off the horse a bit here and there. And to me, the one antidote to the daily grind is nature. You can incorporate it however you want, with photography, without photography, but nature is the key. The photography's in there, but nature is the key. So trust me when I say a peace and calm can come over you that way and help your health. And where does that leave you? Well, it keeps you in the moment more. It helps reduce stress. It makes you a better person. I feel when you're more peaceful and you're more relaxed, you're better in life. You're better around people. You're better around family. You're better around everything. Your mind is clear. Your spirit is alive, and you're more joyful, I feel. So that's what it's all done for me. I hope that people will share this on replay with people, friends and family, so they can see it, maybe take a lot away from it. But as Dawn, Neil, and I all concur, it's what brings you joy and what gives you the most purpose in life, in helping yourself and helping others. And I think that's really where I'll stop and leave it at that. But thank you, Neil, for allowing me to do this show, to share my insight on nature and photography and how it's helped my mental and physical health and helped spur my creativity to new heights, or take it to new heights. I thank you both.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you
Steffen.
so
That
much.
was great. I want to bring in a couple of comments before we close, and I'm going to share in Facebook my blog post, which I didn't share earlier when we were discussing it. So I'm just going to put the link right in there, and then come into, oops, sorry about that. Here we go. That should have brought it in. There we go. And a couple of closing comments from folks before we end the show. Let's see. Jonathan says, great show, great photos. Thank you. And we have, let's see, what else do we have? A lot of comments coming in. Steve Taylor from Philadelphia. Thanks so much. These programs are always cathartic as well as informative for me. Thank you, Steve. My mom says, very good show. Thank you, Mom. Rose, wonderful show, inspiring. And thank you. So appreciate everyone who watched. Again, as a reminder, our next show is going to be September 12th. It's actually episode 15, not 14. I will have to correct that before we finish, but see how quickly I can correct this. And boom, it's episode 15, not 14. Rochelle Kritzer, PhD, or Dr. Rochelle Kritzer, depending on your preference. She's going to talk about the importance of community support. And again, we're live the second and fourth Thursdays of the month. So September 12th will be the second Thursday in September. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to having you watch additional shows. Neela Masi, my aunt, says she enjoyed the show as well. I will also put into the comments a link to our Facebook group. We have a closed Facebook group for this show. For folks who have watched the show, who have connected with us, we encourage you to join us and keep the conversation going. So here is the link to our Facebook group, and you'll see that at the bottom as the last comment. So join the group, keep the conversation going, and again, we'll see you on your next show, September 12th. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
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 Bye.